Hi all, very good evening. Do you guys hear my voice? If yes, please reply. Thank you very much. I got your reply. First, everyone, thank you for registering this AngularJS webinar. Let me introduce myself. I'm Dinesh and I have nearly 10 years of experience in JavaScript technology and nearly 4 years of experience in this AngularJS framework. And my day-to-day work is creating AngularJS custom widgets and providing to the people. Next one, I used to work on the Node.js also. This is my day-to-day work. So before we go into our today's session, just there are basic things. This session is all about just 60 minutes, but we can extend up to 90 minutes. Okay, so each and every module once I completed, so whatever you guys have a question, you can post your questions on the question window. I will be able to answer for your questions, because in between if I answer for your questions, we'll be deviating from the topic, so we may not able to complete everything within this 90 minutes. That's why once I complete particular module, I will check all these questions, whatever you posted in this question window, then I can answer for your questions. So let's go into our today's session. So this webinar is all about AngularJS Superheroic JavaScript MVW framework. Okay, so what are all the things we are going to discuss on this particular webinar? First one, why do we need to use AngularJS? Because in the traditional web application, mostly if you see, we'll be using JSP, ASP or PHP. Otherwise, we have a Jquery library. Normally, we'll be using that particular library. If we have these many options, then why do I need to choose one new framework for my application? Okay, I will be answering for that. Next, what is AngularJS? So is it a framework or library? If it is a framework, what does it mean? Normally, we'll be using a framework in our backend. So Java will be having some framework, or our ASP.NET will be having some kind of MVC framework. So what does it mean by framework in the client side? Normally, why do I need to use a framework on client side? Okay. Then this particular AngularJS is using a MVC or MVW framework, and we will be discussing about that architecture of our AngularJS. Next, AngularJS framework is having some important features. Mainly, if you ask me, the main feature of AngularJS is data binding or dependency injection, custom directives, filters, and n number of features we have. So we'll be basically discussing about some of the features. Next one, we'll discuss about how can we build a responsive single page application with AngularJS. These are all the objective of our today's session. Okay, so one more thing again. So whatever questions you have, just post it in our questions window. Once I complete the particular module, I'll be able to answer for your questions. So let me go to the next slide. Why AngularJS? So till this date, normally we will be using JavaScript libraries, not a framework. First, I have to tell the difference between the library and the framework. So normally this jQuery is a basic library. So what does it mean? They build a set of functionality on top of JavaScript. So using that functionality, so like a click event or mouse over event or bind, these kind of functionality they built on top of the JavaScript to simplify our work. Okay, this is having just some set of functionality. That's what we are calling it as a library. So what else we can call it as a library? Bootstrap. So normally whoever worked on this responsive designing, so they might have know about it, Bootstrap, right? So Bootstrap is a library or underscore JS. So everything is having some set of functionality which simplify our work and life. Okay, that is what the library. And framework, which structures your code, which is having a rules. Okay, you have to code it in this particular way. Why do we need to restrict ourselves? Why do we need to keep follow some kind of rules? Okay, so today we have some kind of requirement and we built the application. There is no structure, anything. Then tomorrow someone else have to maintain our same application. If you don't have any other structure or rules, that will be really difficult for them to get to understand what we have it in our application. That is really difficult. Instead of that, the AngularJS framework or any framework gives a way or structure to your code. Okay, this has to be like this. So keep your model, everything right here, and all the controller logic, everything goes to in this particular place, and your view will be right here. Like this, it will structure your code. With it will be having some more functionalities. That is the main difference between a framework and library. Okay, this is the difference. Then why do I need to go for AngularJS? Because we have n number of frameworks out there like Ember.js, Knockout, Backbone, and some other frameworks are also available. So why AngularJS? So here, first, whenever we develop a web application, what are all the main challenges we face? First one is responsiveness with the different devices. So it's a responsiveness means it is not only the CSS responsive designing. So whatever you are building, so that have to work on the laptop as well as the desktops. In the same time, it has to work on the mobile also. You just leave about the design, it has to work first. So because all this client side program, whatever you are doing, that will be running on your devices. So it have to be compatible. So if you are using some other language or anything else, that will be difficult. It won't be running in mobile, or some other times it won't be running in your iPad, tablet or anything. So this is one of the best, main problem what we have. The next one is diverse of user preference. Normally, now I wanted to see the same application with normal table structural data or just some kind of blocks. But other guy wanted to see it like a graph structure or anything. So there will be very different kind of UI screens or different kind of devices. Everything will be there. So we have to satisfy all the users. That is also one of the biggest challenge what we have today. Next, agility. So whenever we get a new request from our client, okay, so today you have to build this one. Next, in the suddenly they will be changing the request. Okay, and I don't want this. I wanted to go with some other new things. So how can I go ahead with this? So at that time, already if you build something, I don't want to change everything from the beginning. Okay, I need to change only that particular part. How can I do that? So is that possible in any other framework? These are all the web challenges we are facing in our development phase. Next, multiple skill set. This is one of the biggest challenge. So for database administration or anything else, we need our DBA people, and server side, we need a Java or ASP people. Then UI side, you need some kind of specialized in JavaScript. Okay, there are multiple skill sets we need. We can't afford everything. As you are a project manager, then only you'll get to know for each and everything. If you are keeping the people, you can't afford everyone. So and getting the multiple skill set people also, it's really difficult. So these are the main challenges we are facing in the web development. So for everything, we have a solution in AngularJS. Now, let me tell you the solutions. One is the responsiveness. The AngularJS, if you are using AngularJS to build your client side, that is your JavaScript programming, so it will run on all the system, mobile, app, everything. There is no restriction. So our first problem is solved. Next one is diverse universe preference, right? Diverse user preference. So here, what we will be doing is, so in the same way, one is you can open it in the other different size of devices or anything else. Next one is you can create a separate view for each and every users where you can switch between these views. That is really simple in AngularJS using Angular views, or you can create a custom directive. Just pass the data. The same data can be represented in one tabular view or a graph view, whatever it is, whatever user prefer, we can give it in that particular view. Next one is agility. So right here, so whenever we are getting a new requirement from the clients, so if they are changing the requirement also, we can change only that particular controller scope. We need not to change the whole application. That is also possible in our AngularJS. Next, the multiple skill set. So this is a one more trouble. Okay, right here on the UI side, only the people who are having a JavaScript knowledge, they can build everything. They don't need to have something like a JSP or ASP knowledge, right? So if I'm a UI developer, if I know JavaScript and the basic knowledge on the AngularJS, I should be able to build an application. I don't want any multiple skill set peoples right there in my UI development space. In the same way, if you are using Node.js on our server side, still we don't need any other people. Whoever knows JavaScript, they can build an end-to-end application, right? With this, we can solve all the challenges what we are facing in the web development. Next one. So what is AngularJS? So AngularJS is a JavaScript framework where you can build an application on top of it. Okay, so here you can specify the structure for your client side. So normally there will be a structure for your server, but here you should be able to define your structure. Okay, this is my model, this is the data what I'm getting from the server, I want to keep the data over here, and so this is what my view. So all the presentation layer whatever we need to do it, that will go for this view. Next one, controller. So in the controller part, you can write all the business logics, validations, everything. Okay. So this AngularJS is a framework where you can define your code structure. You can increase your code maintainability. Next one. So this AngularJS is a client-side JavaScript framework created by Google. So if you see, if whoever wants to have more control on our client side, in the traditional application, we won't be having much control on our client side. Whatever operation we wanted to do, a business operation or any other things, just we'll pass the data to our server. So server will do everything. Then again we'll be getting the response, we'll be showing the response. So your UI workers getting the data, give it to server, and whatever data you are getting from the server, you have to display to the user. Because at that time we didn't have much powered systems, right? So you can't do very large amount of operations in your browser. So browser was not capable that time. But now in the browser itself, you can store 10 MB of data using our local storage, and it can handle multiple processes also. So why do we need to waste our browser, this much powerful browser? So whatever the business logics and the validations, whatever you wanted to do, everything we can do it in our client side itself. So it will be a lightning fast instead of sending the data to server and getting back the data. And one more main thing is, it is really similar to our HTML, the tags and whatever we have. So we used to call it as a directives in AngularJS. Everything is similar to normal JavaScript and CSS HTML. There is no much difference. So it will be really easy to learn AngularJS. So okay, so who is this guy? Jquery. So he's the one who built our AngularJS. So his way of thinking about the AngularJS is, it is just not a framework. Okay, so it is a compiler where you can create your own HTML elements. So first, what does it mean? So normally you guys know about the basic HTML elements like div, span, input, everything. So each and everything it's having its own property. If you are giving input type equal to text, it is giving a text box. If you are giving div, it will be a block level element. In the same way, you can create your own element. For example, whenever I want to create a new element, I will create something like Dinesh block. So there is nothing is there in the HTML, but for that particular element, I can give the look as well as the functionality. So that is what we are calling it as a directive. And so the Jquery is telling, so it is not only the framework, which is the compiler where you can create your own HTML elements and attribute to it. That is the main important and advantage of AngularJS. So we will be discussing about this custom directives also in this particular webinar. Next one, who are all using this AngularJS? Because if only we are using AngularJS, or if we are opting this AngularJS for our project, what will happen is, whenever we are getting into a trouble, so we won't be getting an answer from any other forums, right? So whatever questions you have, just you can put it in the forums like a Stack Overflow or anything else. So you will be able to get the answers. So if you want to get the answer, first many people have to use the particular framework, right? So if you see the big brands like YouTube, definitely that is bought by Google. So whatever this framework also built by Google, so they are using AngularJS in their YouTube PlayStation 3 version. Next one, the Paytm app. So most of them you could have seen the Paytm app in your browser as well as the mobile. Both are using AngularJS for a client side. Next one is the Netflix and the freelancer.com, weatherchannel.com. These everyone are using AngularJS. So if you are opening that code, you can see lot of Angular elements or Angular directives. You can see it in their code. So next, let us see what is a single page application first. Single page application means normally in the traditional application, first you will be having on JSP or ASP page. When you want to navigate to the next page, the whole page will reload. So whatever data you have it in the scope, you will lose it. Instead of that, I want to have only one HTML. Whatever pages I want to load, just I want to load it like a frames. Using the routes, I want to reload only a particular part of my HTML. Whenever I want to navigate from one page to next page, don't reload the whole page. Just load particular HTML inside the another HTML, how we are doing it in the iframes. Okay, so that is what the single page application that we can achieve using AngularJS. If you are using NG router or UI router, we should be able to get that particular functionality in our application. Next one. So in the AngularJS, what are all the components we have? So first, web UI. So in the web UI, we'll be considering only the HTML, CSS and the basic JavaScript part. So the presentation layer, that's what we are calling it as a view. So all the HTML, so how your application should look like and what are all the styles, colors, everything you will be defining it in your visible UI layer. Next, your application layer. So this layer only you will be writing your AngularJS programming to implement your business logic and all the validations, everything. And if you are using any other APIs, so as I told, like routers or anything, so everything will go under this application layer. Next one is data access layer. So mostly with only the client, we can't do anything. So we have to get a data from our server, right? So to interact with the server, we need one particular layer. So here in AngularJS, we will be using $HTTP to interact with your server. So it will be getting the data as a JSON or XML and we can display those data or information to the user through your presentation layer or the HTML. Next one is sometimes you will be getting the fixed data. The data won't be changed, always will be same. So then why do I need to query the server or database to get the same data? So we are using almost everyone is using the latest browsers like Chrome, Firefox or IE11 or IE10. So each and everything is having one feature called local storage. That is the HTML5 feature. So you can store up to 10 MB of data in your browser memory itself. So if it is a static data, if you are feeling that never changes, just you can keep it in the browser memory. So whenever user opens the same application in the same machine, so instead of querying your server side, just it will take all this data from our browser memory itself, used from the local storage. So using these things only, we will be building a basic AngularJS application. So next one is the responsiveness. So the main thing is, if you are telling the responsiveness, everyone will worry about, okay, it's a CSS part. So how to view this application? It is not how to view, whether will it work in all the devices. So in the AngularJS, we'll be worrying about whether will it work in AngularJS, will it work in all the devices or not. This is what we are calling as a responsive design. But if you want to, look into that CSS designing, just we have more frameworks like Bootstrap or what is a foundation. These are all the CSS framework. You can use it in our application to get this responsiveness. Okay, So before we go into the next slide, do you guys have any other question? Let's spend 3 to 5 minutes for your questions. So first from Akshay, so he's asking, can you go a little bit slower? Sure, Akshay, but anyway, it is only 60-minute session. That's why I'm a little bit rushing through. Okay, we'll go a little bit slower also from here. So from Vinith, we have a question. Can application layer be made up using Node.js? So first, Node.js is not a client-side component. So you can't use this Node.js to view your data, or you can't do any other client-side operations using Node.js. That is your server-side layer. In your UI itself, I wanted to have an application layer. I mean, in the client side itself, I want to have an application layer that we will be building with AngularJS. So first you have to understand the difference between Node.js and AngularJS. Node.js is for only the server side component, which is built on C++, which can compile a JavaScript. So that is our server side part. Our whatever we are doing with Java, PHP, .NET, we can do the same thing with our Node.js. But AngularJS is a client-side framework where you can write all this client-side technology, or the presenting layer, I mean presenting the data, or just transferring the data from client to server. For this, we'll be using AngularJS. Did I answer your question, Vinay? So okay. So let's go for the next question. How do we apply security to application? So first one, right here, whenever you do a data transmission, we have some kind of JavaScript framework which encrypt your data. So for all the data transmission, just encrypt the data and send it to your server with the hash code. So in the server again, you can decrypt the same data with this hash code. So like that only you should be able to get the security on our application. So from Shruti, we have one question. So how AngularJS is better than a knockout? So right here in the session, mostly we won't be comparing the Ember knockout, but let me tell you what I feel best about the AngularJS. So mainly AngularJS don't need any other dependency like knockout or Ember. So knockout and Ember, we need a jQuery and underscore JS, and this kind of dependency we need to run this knockout. But right here in AngularJS, there is no dependency. Just only this AngularJS library is more than enough to run everything. So some of the jQuery components are also available in AngularJS as a jQuery. So that is a main advantage. Next one, there are more users for AngularJS. So what will happen is, whenever you are getting into a trouble, or if you are having any other doubts, just directly you can post your questions in the forum. You will be getting more response in a quick time. Because we have more users started. So they might have faced the same kind of problem. So we'll be getting the responses very quickly. The third one is, there are more modules available for AngularJS. So for example, I wanted to build something like a drag and drop stuff, right? So if you see the knockout, we'll be having very less amount of modules. Because there are not much users are available. So here in AngularJS, we have n number of third-party modules. So just whenever you want, get the over, take this module and you can include it in your application. So you need not to write everything from the scratch. That is the best advantage or best part what I used to tell in AngularJS. That's why I prefer AngularJS over Ember or Knockout. So from Inita, we have a question. What about designing part? So AngularJS, you can implement your business logics and validations. So the designing part, everything depends on your CSS. There is nothing to do with AngularJS on the designing part. So all this logic we can implement with our AngularJS on the client side. So Vinith is asking, so how can it be used to create a data access layer? Normally, what will happen is, in your server side, we will be exposing all these REST APIs, whether it is a Java, .NET or Node servers. So we will be exposing the REST APIs. So you have to consume those exposed REST APIs. To consume those REST APIs, we'll build one layer on our AngularJS using the $HTTP. So which can interact with those REST APIs and gets the response or post the response to the service, and we can access those data using our $HTTP method in AngularJS. So that is what we will be using. So from Ajit, we have a question. Is AngularJS only SPA app? How to make it work with multiple page apps? So the single page application means it is not like it will be having only one page. So the main HTML will be only one. So whenever you are navigating, for example, I have a home page, context page, settings page, and something else, right? So the only one HTML will be having this menu and a body, right? So inside that body, what we are going to load, we'll be having another HTML. Whenever they click on this particular home or any other tabs, we load those HTML inside this HTML. So your parent scope or the main page of your application, that is really single only, just whatever you have, that is only one. You are not going to have multiple pages. So your parent scope always stays. If you are navigating to any page, that doesn't matter. You will be having your parent scope. That is what we are calling it as a single page application in AngularJS. So from Shruti, we have a question. Can we integrate Bootstrap with Angular like a model of Bootstrap containing the knockout form? So we should not use multiple frameworks in a single application, right? So it will increase your page load. So that is really main thing you have to worry about. So it can be just a 50 KB or 86 KB, that doesn't matter. So it will increase your page load. So you should not use multiple frameworks in a single application. That is the first. And you can integrate Bootstrap or any framework with AngularJS model or anything also. That doesn't matter. So let's take a last question, then we can move to the next slide. How can we use router? So this is the question from Rahul. So there is two ways of using routers in AngularJS. One is NG router, that is AngularJS inbuilt module available. So whenever you want, just you can get this NG router from the AngularJS page itself. But it is having some kind of restriction. You can have only one level of view. You can't have a child view or parallel views. That is not at all possible in the NG router. Instead, we can use Angular UI router. So using this Angular UI router, we can have n number of views, and you can have parallel views also. That is the main advantage of using Angular UI router. So for your question, so we have these two routers. If you ask me, the best approach to use the router is Angular UI router. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. But I know I didn't answer for many of your questions. So you can put all the questions in our Edureka form, so I should be able to answer for it. Because if I answer for all the questions, we can't cover whatever we plan for this particular webinar. Sorry for that, guys. So let me go to the next slide. So first, there, AngularJS in data. Here, so the AngularJS, they are calling it as a MVC or MVW framework. First, what does it mean? So in the server side, you might have heard about this MVC framework. M stands for model. So that's what the data, whatever you want to play around, that's what we will be calling it as a model. And next one, view. View is your presentation layer, whatever the HTML, CSS and other stuff you are writing, right? So that is what we are calling it as a view. Next, controller. So right here in the controller only, we will be writing all our validations, business logics, everything. So what will happen is actually, whenever you get a data from your server, this data you can assign to your scope of your particular controller. So scope is nothing but it is like an instance of your controller. Once you assign a data to the scope, so here it is having one best feature called two-way binding. So the same scope you can access it in your HTML also using the ng model directive. So whenever you are changing the data in your HTML, automatically it updates the scope variable, or if you are changing the scope, automatically it updates the view because of this two-way binding feature. So how does it happen? Normally, in AngularJS controller, internally there will be having one service called $watch. So which watches all your scope variables. So if any change happens in the scope, just it will trigger a method so which applies all the changes whatever happen. So it will automatically update the view. So updating view means it won't reload the view, just it will update the data all. This is how normally two-way binding happens. So okay, this is clear. MVC framework. So what does it mean by MVW? Because there is many things available in AngularJS. It is not only the controller. So you can write all your logic using the controller, directive, or we have many things over there. So that's why if you see it in the AngularJS forum or other places, there will be a very big debate. So it is not a MVC framework. It is MVVM framework. So VM means it is a model view model because you are not at all writing only the validation or business logic in your controller. That is actually it's having the view model. Because of that only, whenever you changing the data, it is changing the view, right? So someone is calling it as a view model or some other group is calling it as a controller. Still there is no conclusion. So it is like MV. So model view is fixed and W stands for whatever. So you can call it as a view model or a controller or controller directive, whatever it is available. Okay, so that is what the MVC or MVVM or MVDW framework. Normally, if you ask me, just I will be going for MVW. So because it is still not able to fix because I'm feeling I'm writing all this controller logic right here in the same time I have my scope model also. So if I update my scope, automatically it's updating the view. If I update the view, it is getting changed. So that is what we are calling as a view model. So still we are not able to figure it out. So still we can make it as a MVW. Okay, so what are all the features available in our AngularJS? So the main feature, as I told, first one is two-way binding or data binding. In the normal jQuery, so if you want to have a text box, if you want to give the data, we'll search through the DOM, we'll find the particular class or ID, add the value to it. And if you want to get the data from the text box, again search through the DOM, get the class or ID of that particular text box, then get it. So it is really tedious process. Instead of that, if I change my data something in my JS, so it has to update in the view. That's your HTML. So for that, we can use the AngularJS two-way binding. So in few minutes, I will show you a demo how can we implement AngularJS scopes and other stuff. Next one is AngularJS directives or expressions. So sorry, first we'll go for expressions. Normally, in the HTML itself, I want to compile my JavaScript, give the result. For example, 1 plus 1 and I want to write it in the HTML. So I will be getting some result. So normally if you write 1 plus 1 in your HTML, what will happen is it will print 1 plus 1 only. It won't give 2. So if you want to compile your JavaScript on your HTML, you'll be using these expressions. Next one, directives. So AngularJS is having inbuilt directives. So those are all like ng click or controller or whatever it is. That is nothing but a set of functions which already they built where we can use it from the framework. That is what we are calling as a directives. Okay, they have already enough directives, but I want to build my own directive, something new for my project specific directive. That also you should be able to create it. So for that, what we used to call it as custom directives in AngularJS. Next one is services. Sometimes you can have n number of controllers in your AngularJS application. You want to share the data between these controllers. So how can we do it? So for that, we will be using the services which connects these two controllers and we will be sharing the data between the controller using the services. Next one is filters. So if you want to modify the data or search, sort, everything you can do it in your client side itself. No need to do everything from the database, sort, search and other stuff. So we'll achieve all these logics using our AngularJS filter. And in the same way, we have n number of features that are available like modules, scope, validations, unit testing, and dependency injection. Yeah, okay. This is the main thing, the dependency injection. Sometimes what will happen is whatever data, sorry, not data, whatever the functionalities I needed, I can inject those functionality into my application using this dependency injection. So in AngularJS, whenever you declare your application, you will be giving some kind of empty braces. So if you are giving empty braces, I don't need anything else except my application. Instead, I want to use some other feature, some other functionalities. So we will pass those things as a dependency injection. So whenever we need it for our application, at that time we can inject those functions or methods to our application. Okay, this is what we are using. We are calling it as a dependency injections in AngularJS. So how to build a responsive single page application using AngularJS. So let's go to our first program. Let me go back folder right here. I want to create our first program. So what we need is, let me create a new HTML file. Just I'm going to call it as index.html. Next, you need to download AngularJS script file from our AngularJS org, or you can get it from Bower, or you can get the CDN link also. But already I have downloaded this AngularJS script file. You can see it over here. I already have angular.min.js file. So this one I'm going to include it in my index.html. So first let me open this index.html in the editor. So let's wait. It will take seconds to load. Okay, got it. Okay, fine. So this is the normal HTML page. Let me create my first AngularJS program. HTML:5. This is the shortcut what we have in the Sublime editor. If you want to create the HTML5 program, just type HTML:5 and tab. It will create the structure of your HTML5 program. So let me call it as a demo. And first, without any other AngularJS, first I am going to launch this app and I want to show something. Hello world. Okay, so let me keep it in the bold so it will be easy for you guys to read. Let me open this particular HTML in the browser. Now you can see there is no error, nothing, and in the sources, if you see, you don't have anything except your index.html, and it is showing hello world. Now what we are going to do, I wanted to do some operation. Let's put it this way: hello world 1 plus 5. So if I save and run it in the browser, it won't compile it, just it will give 1 plus 5 only. But I wanted to compile it over there in the HTML itself, or I wanted to do some other operations. So how can I do it? First, I want to include my AngularJS script file to make my application as a AngularJS app. So let's include the script file. Script source equal to, so I have all this data or all the script file in the library lib folder. Okay, so let me put library slash angular.min.js. This is where I have my script file. Okay, now I loaded my script file. So does it mean, is it the AngularJS application? So shall we try that? So let's go over there, refresh. So if you see console, there is no error. In the sources, we have added the angular.min.js file. So now we have added an AngularJS script. So why is it not converting? Okay, sometimes you have to add expressions to convert these thing as a JavaScript compiler. So let me add expressions. So this is how we'll be adding expressions in AngularJS. So save it. Let's try again. What is happening? Still you can see the same brackets. It is not at all compiling. Already we have included the Angular min file. Why is it happening? So once you are including this Angular min.js file, what will it do is it will search for a directive called ng app. So once it finds the directive of ng app, then only it will define, okay, this is where my application starts. Till that time, it won't consider these HTMLs as a AngularJS application. It will be a normal HTML file. That's it. There is nothing about this AngularJS. So just a HTML is having a one file called angular.min.js. So it is not behaving like AngularJS application. So to make it as AngularJS application, first include this angular.min.js. Next one, include your ng app. So once you include the ng app, then only your AngularJS will understand, okay, the whole HTML is a Angular application. Now if I add this ng app in the body, the whole body will be the AngularJS application. Everything will be compiled, whatever we are writing. So now the whole HTML becomes the AngularJS application. Let's try what happens now. Whenever I refresh, now you can see it over here, the 5 plus 1 become a 6. Whatever you are giving inside the double flavor braces, so that is what we are calling it as expressions in AngularJS. It will compile and it will give a result of that particular variables. Now we got 6 over there. Okay, so do we have only this in AngularJS? What are the new features we have? The main thing I was talking about, the two-way binding. So let's build input type equal to text and ng model. So this is how we will be binding the data to the text box. Ng model equal to name. Just consider this is a scope variable. Now what I wanted to do, whatever user enters in this particular text box, I want to print right here. Let me create one more h2 tag. So I wanted to print here. So I'm giving the same name, whatever I use right here. So ng model equal to name, I'm passing the same scope variable right here to my h2 tag. So that also passed in between the flower braces. So the scope variable will be compiled and it gives the data. If I'm giving the same name without this flower braces, what will happen is, let me save. So now you can see it is as a only name. It won't compile it. It will be considered as a normal string. So instead of that, we can mark it as a expression. So it will, this name will be compiled. So whenever I run this, you can see it is empty. Because the model also empty, it is compiling and it gives the result as empty. Now if I enter any other text, you can see that text is automatically coming right here. If you want to achieve the same thing in jQuery or a normal JavaScript, what you need to do? You have to watch for a key up event in your text box. Once the key up happens, get the value of the text box and get the text or ID of this particular data and bind those values. This is really tedious. Instead of that, we have the two-way binding feature. So we are changing the view. So this is the HTML is your view. Whenever we change the view, your model is your name. So this is where all the data available. So the model automatically gets updated. Now model is got updated. Again, I'm trying to use the same model right here. So it updates the view. So whenever I make a change in one place, automatically it triggers a watch and watch listens for these kind of events and it updates the model. So model again updates your view. So this is what we are calling it as a two-way binding in AngularJS. Okay, now we created the basic app. I want to create an app and multiple controllers and other stuff. So for that, what you need to do, first you have to name your app. I'm going to call it as demo. Okay, my app name is going to be a demo. So let me create a new file. Let me save it as custom.js. Okay, so we have to include that script file right here. So script source equal to custom.js. So now we have done that. Next one, first to bootstrap the application. So what I will be doing is where your app equal to angular.module of your app name, whatever you define right here. I define it as a demo, so mark it as a demo. And if you have any other dependencies or anything else, you can mark it over there, but I don't have any dependencies for my app, so I will be giving empty braces. Now we declared or we bootstrapped our application. Next, I want to write a controller. So whatever business logics and other stuff I wanted to build it in the application, I want to put it somewhere else. So that is where we will be using the controller. So app.controller So how do we write it? First give a name of the controller. Just I'm going to call it as a test CTRL. Then function. So whatever the parameters you want to pass to the controller, just pass it right here. I want to use $scope inside my controller. So as I told you guys, the $scope is nothing but the instance of your controller. For example, if you guys are a Java developers, we'll be having a class. So the class can have a multiple variables methods. So if you want to access those variables or methods, what will be doing is, we'll create a new instance of your class. With that instance, we should be able to access your variables and methods. So like instance dot that particular variable name, so you can get the variable name, or instance dot that method name, you can access that method name. In the same way, whatever available in your controller, so if you want to access it, we will be accessing through your instance. That is what your scope. So first, I want to create one scope variable inside my controller. I'm going to call it as $scope dot webinar name. Webinar name. Okay. So this is what my scope variable. I'm going to call it as Angularjs. So now this scope variable will be having the value of this. This is called Angularjs. Okay. Now my controller is ready. I wanted to bind this controller with my HTML. So how can I do that? So let me delete whatever piece of code I have it right here. So let me create a div. So I'm going to append that controller in my div. So ng controller equal to your controller name, whatever the controller name you have, test controller. Now, if you are including anything right here inside this particular div, so everything will come under this particular controller. So all the scope variables or methods, whatever we have it in the controller, everything can be accessible inside this particular controller div. Okay, what does it mean? So let me create a normal h1 tag. So where I want to see the data what is available on this webinar name. So copy this and put it in our h1 tag. Now whenever we load the page, it will load this controller. From the controller, first this will be undefined or empty. Next, once the controller is loaded, for this particular scope variable, we are assigning the value called AngularJS. So the variable got changed. So this variable has been used in this particular HTML. So it updates the view. That's why what happens is whenever I refresh the page, you can see AngularJS right here. It will go to the controller part. Let me put a debugger point. So this is how we'll be debugging in our JavaScript or AngularJS. So I kept a debugger point. Whenever I refresh the application, till that time, it is not at all having anything. So once you load the controller, just I refreshed it, automatically it loads the controller. Then once the controller is loaded, so what will happen is it is assigning the scope variable of webinar name equal to AngularJS. So the scope variable got changed. Till the time it is undefined. You can see it right here. So after this line, this scope variable become AngularJS, and this scope variable got changed. It updates the view. So the same AngularJS will be available right here. This is how normal AngularJS is working. But now I wanted to make it a little bit complex. Here, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to create a button. Okay, so before that, let me create one more text box. Input type equal to text and ng model equal to username. Then what I'm going to do, I want to create one more button, so which is add user. So if they click on this particular button, I want to, whatever the name available in this text box, I want to add it in a list, and I needed to list everything. How can I do that? First, let's go one by one. First, I'm going to add a click event, add user. So this is a method. So whenever click happens on this particular button, it will call a method called add user. This ng click is a AngularJS directive. Now let's go back to your controller. First, this username will be undefined. So let's make it as a So let it be undefined. I don't want to worry about that. For now, let's go ahead with this. Next, I want to create one method because there is no method is available called add user in your controller. It will throw an error. So let me create a scope method and $scope dot add user equal to function, right? So whenever I click on that button, it will come over here. So here just I wanted to print whatever we have in this particular text box. So how can we get the data? $scope dot username. Now let's save this. Let's go back and refresh. I don't want any other debugger. So let me remove it. So let's go to the console of this application. I'm going to see Edureka, add user. Now you can see it right here. So whenever I click on the button, it will come to that particular function and it reads the data it given. So I didn't do anything else. Just I gave the same model name. So whatever model name binded to your view, so whenever that view changes, it updates the model and we are getting the data from the model alone. But now we are going to make it a little bit complex. I'm going to create one more scope variable called users or user list. So I'm going to mark it as an array. So first the user list will be array. So whenever user click on this add user button, I want to add a keep on data to this user list. So how can we do that? So let's go over here, $scope dot user list dot push whatever data you have it in your $scope dot username. $scope dot username. So whenever I click on this add button, it will read the data from this scope variable and it will put it in the another scope variable called list. Once it is done, I want to show that list also. So console.log scope.userList. So let's go over here, refresh. So first I am adding hello, add. So now you can see the array. The array is having only one value. In the same way, you're going to add one more word called word. So again added. So now the array is having 2. So in the same way, you can add n number of words. Everything has been added to the array. But I want to display to the user. Otherwise, just if I have it in the console, no one sees it. How can I display it? So here we have one important directive called ng repeat. So however for loop works on your JavaScript, in the same way we can build an object over here or we can build a data. So let's go over here. H2 is user information. Next, ULLI. Yes, I wanted to list all the users. So LI. So each and every time I add a user, it will create a new LI and it has to show those information. So here I'm going to use the directive ng repeat of whatever the array you mentioned right here. It is a user list array. So user list. So here, how do we write a for loop? So user in user list. So first time, the first object will pass to the user and we will be having that particular user object. Next time we will be having the second object. If the user list is having 10 objects, first time it will be having the first, second time second, third time third. Like that each and every object will be available, the whole list is available right here. Then it is just an array. So I want to print those user in my LI. So if I have n number of user list, automatically it creates the LI event and will be printing those users. So let's see how does it happen. Refresh. Let's go over here. Hello. Add. So now you can see that one. Next I'm going to add word. And next AngularJS. Right? So whenever we add it, so the data will be pushed to this user list array. So this array will be iterated using the ng repeat and we are printing those data on your HTML. The code is really simple, nothing else. The same thing if you want to do it in JavaScript, watch the event, get the data, create a new LI object and bind the LI object. It's really tedious process. Now it is really simple. We are passing the data. We are playing around with the data right here instead of playing with the DOM elements. That is the main difference between the AngularJS and jQuery. Okay, so before we move to the next slide, if you guys have any other question, please post your questions in the question window. Let's spend 5 minutes to answer all your questions. So Vinitha is asking, can you tell me about data access like ASP.NET we have SQL Server. Okay, so this is your only the client side application. Right here, if you want to store the data or if you want to access the data, you need one server side language. Without server side language, you can't do anything. So still you need your ASP.NET and SQL. But here what we are going to do is the ASP.NET will expose your services. Instead of writing the code in the ASPX page, we will be writing a basic HTML, and the HTML will be having your AngularJS framework. And we will be exposing all the web services in the ASP.NET. So that from the AngularJS code, we'll use the $HTTP method which calls this exposed REST APIs, and we'll be getting the data and we can bind those information in our client side. AngularJS doesn't have anything like a SQL or server side stuff. So it is only for client side. So always you need to use the ASP or Java, whatever it is, you have to use it for the server side. We are not going to test the server. We are changing the whole client side of your application. Next question from Prabhakar. So he is asking what is the editor name. So this is Sublime editor. It is really cool for all this JavaScript development. Mainly I love it all the shortcuts what we have. So if you want to create some kind of table ULLI, it is really simple. So Vinith is asking for is asking me to open the code window. Let me open the code window and we'll be answering for your questions. Okay. Now Manidhar is asking, can we have a controller inside a controller? Yeah, you can have it. You can have n number of controllers. So for example, you are going to have a parent controller and a child controller. So again, it is like a normal Java inheritance. So consider I have a parent class and child class. Child class inherits or extends the parent. Now what happens, whenever you create a new instance of your child, you can access your child method as well as the parent method. But from the parent, you can't access the child. The same way, you can create n number of controllers, the parent controller, child controller, and grandchild controller. So this child controller can access the parent. So for example, in the child controller, I have $scope.name. In the parent controller, I have $scope.firstName. So if I try to use that parent controller scope variable in my child controller, that is possible. It will give the data. But the reverse, if I try to use the child controller scope variable in the parent, that what? It will give empty or undefined. It is normally, however, we have this inheritance in our normal Java. So from Anand we have a question. How is Angular 2 different from this? All these directives and expressions work in AngularJS 2. AngularJS 2 also bit difficult. I mean bit not difficult, so different. Mostly there is no concept of controllers. So here there is a new thing is available like directives. So mostly we'll be having each and everything as a pieces, components. Okay. So in the AngularJS 1.x or 1.4, if you are building everything with only the directive without the controller, you should be able to easily migrate into the AngularJS 2 because that is not having the controller logic. It is mainly into your directives and whatever remaining. Remaining things are same. The dependency injection, expressions, and other things whatever we have that is totally similar. But the only different is there is no controller in it. So you have to build the way of programming will be a little bit different on Angular 2.0. So from Vinith, we have a question. How is it Bootstrap different from AngularJS? So Bootstrap is a CSS framework. There is nothing to do with AngularJS. So it is just for a styling purpose. So if you want to write the functionality, you have to go with AngularJS. So that is totally different. AngularJS is a JavaScript framework and Bootstrap is a normal CSS framework which have some JavaScript library. That's it. So from Ajit, we have a question. It is really valid question. As most of the code is written on the client side, is it not exposed to the security threat? Anybody can modify the functionality by just downloading and changing the server side code on their machine. Okay, exactly. So now, right here, what we are going to do is you will be adding on your server side validations also. For example, I'm a hacker. Just I can put a breakpoint on the server, I mean client side code. I can make a change. For example, I want to send some money like 500 rupees. Instead of that 500, I can pass 5,000 rupees. So consider I have done the validation. Okay, and in my bank account I have only 500. Now when it goes to the server side, we should write all these validations in the server side also. So you can't always believe with our client side. It is not only in AngularJS, any framework, anything, because that is running on the client side machine. So for example, if I open any other application, I will be getting all the code. I will automatically, my browser downloads the whole scripting and will keep it in my browser and will be running it. But the server side code, I can't do it. That will be in somewhere else, somewhere server it will be there. Okay, so you should not show or any other confidential information. You should not do it in your client side. It can be Angular, JSP or whatever it is. But so sometimes there is not much security threat. One thing is do the encryption. So they can't get all this encryption and all. So only they can track the data when you transfer the data from your client to UI, sorry, client to server. That is the main threat what we have. So for that alone, what we can do, we can add all this encryption logics in our AngularJS code, which encrypt the data, send it to the server, and the server just decrypt it again. But main concern is whatever validation and whatever security stuff you wanted to do, that you have to do it in your server side also. You should not 100% believe the client side. We are doing it on the client side because to improve the performance. Everything will be the lightning fast. So from Manithar we have a question. How can we web service call using Ajax and Jquery? Okay, so here instead of Ajax, we'll be using a $HTTP. Using the $HTTP, we should be able to call all these web services or REST APIs. That is what we used to call it in AngularJS. And from Abhishek Saxena, we have a question: how to protect the JavaScript code or how to minify the code? Any tool? There are many tools are available. Something like if you are using a grunt and other kind of task runner, which we through this you can compress all the code. That is one way. Otherwise, online JavaScript tools are available. Just copy paste your JavaScript code to it. It's a kind of a JS compressor and other stuff. Copy paste your code on it and click on compress. It will create a minified version. Again, take that one manually. We have to do it. Instead of that, if you have a grunt, you can configure the task automatically, which creates the minified version of your code. So the tool name is grunt or gulp. Also, you can use it. So Manager is asking, how can we clone the input text using AngularJS? So here you don't need to clone. So the same data, we are sharing the scope of your variable. So if you want to get the same data, you can use the same scope variable. But if you want to modify the data without changing the original scope variable, there is one method called copy. So angular.copy, which copies your scope variable, and you can keep it in the another scope variable or another normal JavaScript variable also. And from Shruti, we have a question: which server we use with AngularJS for validations? There is for validation, you don't need any server. The validation will happen on your client side. Everything you can write it in your AngularJS framework itself. So that is what we will be doing. So the AngularJS which works with all kind of servers. It can work with Java, ASP.NET, anything. That doesn't matter. Shruti is asking, so what is it for security? So security, yeah. So from this AngularJS, we'll be passing the data. So you can pass the data to any server. There is no, AngularJS is not dependent on server or a platform. You can use any server. There is no restriction. So Oscar Hussain is asking for the spelling of grunt. Grunt. That is what grunt. It is a tool you can configure it using Node. And Sujit is asking, using Bootstrap plus Angular Node.js, will it slow down the application? To be frank, the next generation of application will be the min stack application. So which will be using MongoDB, Node.js, AngularJS and Express. When we build this application with these 4 components, it will be lightning fast. So that will be the next generation of the application. So from Manjit is asking, can you answer for my question? So Manjit, can you post your question once again? I think so. I missed your question. Okay, so I got Manjit's question. So Manjit is asking for how can we do the image upload in Java AngularJS? Normally, for image upload, what we'll be doing, we'll be creating a multi-part file. So using that multi-part file only you can upload. So normally the form type will be a multi-part and click on the submit, it will submit the data. So instead of that, create a normal file upload, just the file in the input tag, then get the data. Once you get the data using the HTML5 feature, whatever you wanted to read, you can read it or you can read it as a buffer. So once you get those buffered data, you can create your own multi-path object in the JavaScript and add that multi-path object as a form type or of your $HTTP method and send it to the server. So here the logic is you have to create your own multi-path file in your $HTTP. Then only you can upload the file. So let's take the last question. From Babalu Kumar, we have a question. One is for testing the code in AngularJS, what can we use? Mostly, some people will be building the automation testing for AngularJS application. So for that, you can use Jasmine framework with the Protector. That is one more tool which is built on top of the Selenium. So to use that, we can use that to create all the automation test cases for your AngularJS application. And if you want to build any unit test cases for your AngularJS, we'll be normally going with the Jasmine framework. So that with Jasmine or Mocha also we can use it to create all these unit test cases. Okay, so now again we have only 20 more minutes. Let me cover the other topics. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, right here we have seen our first AngularJS program and we created our controller and we have seen what is the need of ng app, everything. So let's go over there. So normally to build AngularJS page, what do we need? First, we need a basic text editor and the latest browser. If you want to build the whole application, we normally I prefer Node.js compared to Java, ASP, everything. So we can run our own Node server and we can put all the data in the MongoDB. Then we can create the basic thing like a login form with the application. We can create a new user, view the user list, updating the existing user list and delete user list. Okay, this is the basic application. Now we can't build everything together. So already I built the application. Let me demo this application for you now. So we are going to demo it. Let me go back to this project. add folder to the project. Okay, so this is the project what we have. So right here, whatever I have, node modules, server side components, it is all about the servers. Okay, so I built everything using the Node.js server, but here this webinar is more specifically for AngularJS, so we are not going to concentrate on this server side part. Let me show you what we have in our client side. So let me delete these things. Let's open the folder of this one, and here we have our index.html. In the index.html, I named this app as user management. Okay, so if you are mentioning this user management app, first you have to bootstrap this app. So right here, let's go over there. You can see I created the Angular module of user management. Next, the first example, if you have seen, we had a empty array, but now the array is having one more value called UI router. What is it? So this is what I was talking about. If you want to navigate from one page to next page or everything, if you want to create a multiple and parallel routings, we'll be using this particular component. So if you want to use any other external components, include those external components as a dependency injection of your application. Now we have injected this UI router. Then next you have to configure your UI router. So if your URL is /login, open this particular HTML. If your URL is /home, open this particular HTML. So now it won't open the HTML directly. This is where we have a small trick. If you see it in your body, we have one more directive called UI view, and it is empty. So whatever the HTML and other stuff you are opening, automatically that will come over here, and the HTMLs will be loaded on this particular index.html. There is only one HTML always, that is index.html, and remaining HTMLs whatever we have, the login.html. So here in the pages we will be having everything. So login.html, list.html, home.html, everything will be loaded inside this one view. Okay, this is what we are calling it as a single page application. So let me run this app first, so that will be easier. Open it in the terminal. So before I run this app, I have to start my Mongo instance, otherwise it will throw error. Okay, now my Mongo instance has been started. You can see it right here. It is listening to the port number 27017. Now everything is ready. Now I can start my node server also. So let me start this node app.js. Okay, it is not clear. Let me clear it. Let's put it like this. Okay, now my node server has been started and it's listening to port number 3000. So I have configured for port number 3000. Let's go back and I'm going to mark it as localhost colon 3000. So here, so first it is loading the index.html. Once the index.html is loaded, automatically it will call our AngularJS controller file or the first file, that app.js. So in the app.js, if you see it, so I don't want this particular app.js, I mean this is one what I need. So in the app.js, if you see it, first I have configured the routers. So in the router, if there is no match available, I wanted to open this login as a default router of my application. Okay, so whenever I load the HTML page, it will changing the URL as /login. So when I have written all the functionalities, when the URL is /login, open this particular HTML page, login.html. So if you see it over here, I will be having the login.html, and the login.html needs to have this login controller. So let me open this login.html and login.controller. In the login.html, I have nothing but username, and it is having the scope variable of login.user.username and login.user.password, and it is having the login method. Whenever I click on this login method, it is going to the controller. Here I have this login method, and which uses the dollar scope. Sorry, this is $HTTP. So I wanted to pass the username and password to the server to get the information. So the method of post URL which pass this information to the API/user/login, which passes the data, and will be having the console method. Then it will be having the response. So once you get the response, if it is success, just go to the home or just throw the error. Okay, error occurred or whatever the message we have. So this is the basic functionality. This is how we'll be making a $HTTP method, whatever the method name and the URL. So let's go over here and log in. Then, and I'm going to have the password also this. Okay, so I don't have any other username or password on this one. Let me get anything quickly. Okay, so I gave a username and password as a test, so it is validated. The same data was available in our database also, so actually it came over here. So it right here, it went, the URL has become home/list. So if you see again our app.js, I have home which is having the child UI router or UI views. So that's why it will become home.list, and the URL is list, and the parent URL is home. So it will become /home/list. So whenever it becomes like this, I wanted to load the list.html. So in the list.html, if you see, that will be really simple. I will be having a table head and the ng repeat of whatever user list I'm getting. I will be getting all the data. And if you want to sort, we'll be using the filter of sort by the first name. So it will sort all the information with this first name. So the list.js will be getting, once you go into the controller, we'll make a call to the $HTTP method. The $HTTP method gets the data, and we'll be getting all the information right here. So this is the main thing about AngularJS. Now we are in the user management. In the same way, we can go to the create method. So it is just page navigation alone is happening. If you see over here, the URL changes. If the URL changes, using the configuration, it will load the another HTML pages. From the HTML pages, we can display all the information, or if you want to post the data, everything is possible right here. So once you are done with everything, just you can click on sign out. It will take you back to the login page. This is the basic application we built using normal AngularJS. And next, I will be showing you one more application which uses the rich AngularJS animation and other stuff. I built it is for my personal use. Let me show it to you. It is all about metro cab. So just for showcase purpose, I have done this app. Now if you want the same router I'm using, it's an AngularJS application, nothing but here we have the login. So if I want to register anything, I'll be clicking on this thing. So instead of normal page navigation, automatically it will give all these kind of animations. So here also, if you see, there is nothing but the normal page navigation using the router, but here I have added animation. There is one more module is available called ng animate. Include that module as a dependency injection to your application. So if you want to log in, just this and then. So it will take you to this login, and here if you want to chat with multiple people, whoever available, everyone will be listed on this chat. So we should be able to chat, and you can navigate to each and every page. You can see here on the top, everything is nothing but the URL change. Each and every URL change, I am just redirecting this application to some other page, and we'll be getting the informations. But I'm doing it with some basic animations. Okay, you can build these kind of rich applications also using AngularJS with Twitter Bootstrap CSS framework. So this is what fairly we have for our today's webinar. So if you guys have any other questions, you can please put your questions on your question window. You have 10 more minutes. From Abhishek, we have a question. Can we get this code sample? Yes, Abhishek, please contact our Edureka support. So they should be able to provide this particular webinar code sample, and the same video also will be available in our Edureka link. And from Prabhakar, we have one more question. Can we have more than one UI view in a single HTML? Yes. You can have a multiple views in a single HTML, but just you have to name it as different. So that is what we are calling it as a parallel views. That is possible using NG. If you are using NG router, you can't do it. For that, you have to use Angular UI router. So with that, you can have a parallel views. So Manish is asking how to configure Bower to download the components for AngularJS. It is simple. First, install npm in your machine or a node. So once you install the node, automatically it will take the npm. Once you are getting the npm, you can install Bower. That is nothing but npm install -g Bower. So you should be able to get the Bower components in your machine. So Manish Sharma is asking, can we create online chat using AngularJS? It's for the client side, whatever you need, you can build it with AngularJS. But the server side, the push technique and other stuff, we can't make it. So for the server side, you have to go for a node or anything else. I built this one with a node. So Ajit is asking, why do you prefer Node.js over Java on the server side? So normally the Java is mostly synchronous programming, and the main thing I worry about the Java is the multi-threading concept, right? So for example, if I have some kind of stuff, it will go each and every line by line. First line may take one. I have multiple process. So first process taking 5 minutes. Sorry, 5 seconds. Second process is taking only 2 seconds. Now what will happen? Totally, it will take 7 seconds to complete all the process. But if I take Node.js, it is asynchronous programming. So all the process will be running parallelly. All this multi-threading and other concepts also will be handled internally. You need not to worry about everything. And it is main thing is asynchronous programming. That is the main advantage of Node.js. That's why I used to go over Node.js over Java. And one more thing, we have a main thing called a socket. So the Java, you will be getting only the request and response. But if you want to push some response to your client side, that is possible only in our Node.js. So Ajit is asking, is there no need to for any HTML form or tags to get post in AngularJS? Exactly. There is no form needed. We'll do everything with $HTTP method. So from Manidhar is asking, do we have to do anything additional to get the application responsive? So as a CSS responsive, you have to include the Bootstrap or Foundation CSS framework. On the client side, you include AngularJS to run the same application in multiple devices. You need to include these two files. That is the main thing. So Manish is asking, can we use npm on Windows? Exactly. So don't get npm alone. Better install node in your Windows. Automatically that will pull npm. So whatever I am using, my operating system is also normal Windows 7. So just I install the node with node you will be getting the npm also. So just go to node.js.org. You can get the node and npm. So Manidhar is asking, how can we create a static header and footer for all the pages? So normally if you want to create a static header and footer, you fix your index.html with header and footer and create a body which has this UI router. So whenever you are navigating using the URLs, automatically that will change only this body, not the header and footer. So that is how we can build this normal single page application. So Buchibabu is having a question, can we use AngularJS in SharePoint sites? Yes, but my concern is don't complicate more frameworks in a single application. That will affect the performance. So if you are using some framework for your client side, just go ahead with only one framework. But the server side, that doesn't matter. You can have anything. So server side one framework, client side one framework. That's what we need. Don't complicate your application with multiple frameworks. So Manidhar is having a question. So you said Bootstrap will slow down the application. Does AngularJS has any other framework? So Manidhar, I didn't say it. Bootstrap will slow down the application. So Bootstrap is totally different. Bootstrap is CSS framework. Okay. So if you want to create the CSS responsiveness, like what do you say? So whenever you are opening the page, it has to look similar on all other devices. Nothing about the work. Look similar. That we will achieve using the Bootstrap. If you want to work similar, that we can achieve using AngularJS. That is totally different. But instead of including your bootstrap.js, you can include your Angular tab. That is one more thing. So because the bootstrap will go for the DOM manipulation, to avoid that we can include Angular tab in the application. That will be helpful. Do you guys have any other questions? Okay, so we came to the end of our today's session. So before that, Ravi Prakash is having one question. What kind of filters are available in AngularJS? So in the filters, we have something like order by, search, or uppercase, lowercase, and you can convert the date using the date filter, number filter. These are all the inbuilt filters are available. If you want, you can create your own filter on this AngularJS also. Okay, so at last we came to the end of the session. So what are the things we discussed and what we have to take away? So first we discussed about the single page application. Next we were discussing about the AngularJS framework. Then the features, right? So the two-way binding or a $HTTP scope variable and other stuff we were discussing. So now we might have an answer. So what is AngularJS? It's a framework and it will give a structure to your client-side code with more functionalities. That is what the AngularJS. Next, we have seen the basic features, whatever we have it in AngularJS. We can't cover everything in 60 minutes or 90 minutes. That's why we have gone to the basic feature. Next one, we are discussing about the single page application using the UI router. At last, we did a very basic project on AngularJS. Okay, these are all the things we did it in our today's webinar. Okay, so last we have 3 more minutes. If you guys have any other questions, please post your questions on the question window. Okay guys, once again thank you very much for attending this webinar, and this session whatever we did today, so that will be available in our Edureka website. In the same time, if you want whatever code we used in our demo, if you want to get that, you can write a mail to our support@edureka.com. You should be able to get a reply from them. So again, thank you very much. Have a nice day. See you all. Bye bye.